Alright, so we just got finished with a tangent function. Well, let's look at the cotangent now as we begin to broaden our scope. Okay, so for instance, let's look at y equals the negative cotangent of 4x plus pi. Now, if you are, if you remember, if we have that negative in front, what does that tell us about our graph? Well, hopefully you're saying that it's flipped. Okay, so we know it's going to be a flipped cotangent function. So instead of decreasing like all cotangents do, it's going to increase. Okay, so let's go ahead and take our bx plus c, set it equal to 0 and pi, because remember that's the standard cycle for cotangent, and solve these. So that gives us 4x equals negative pi and x equals negative pi over 4. Subtract, and that gives you 4x equals 0, so x equals 0. Now this is our interval. Okay, negative, this is one full cycle here. One cycle. So we're going to graph 2 cycles. Let's graph 2 cycles. That's 1. So I know that at negative pi over 4 and 0 are going to be asymptotes. Now, how did I know that? Because at the end of the cycles for both tangent and cotangent, we have vertical asymptotes. So this is a vertical asymptote. This is a vertical asymptote. Now, I worked it out like this because I know this is how it's going to come on test. This is how you're going to do it. You're going to get nervous, and you're going to forget about your phase shift. And you're going to look at this and say, uh-oh, where's my phase shift? Well, remember, phase shift can be found as negative c over b. So the phase shift here would be negative pi over 4. And period for tangent and cotangent is pi over b. So this would be pi over 4 as our period. Well, what would our increment be? Well, our increment is the period divided by 4. So pi over 4 divided by 4, which is pi over 16. Okay, so that would be our increments there. All right, so now let's go to this next page before we begin to graph this. So we know that for y equals the negative cotangent of 4x plus pi, we know that one cycle is from negative pi over 4 to 0. We know the period is pi over 4. We know the increment is pi over 16. And we know the phase shift is negative pi over 4. Okay, so now we can graph. So go ahead, draw your graph. And so this would be negative pi over 4, and of course 0 is right here. And we know that at those two lines we have vertical asymptotes. So at these two lines we have vertical asymptotes. Well, where is our next vertical asymptote? Because remember what I said, I want to graph 2 cycles. This is 1 cycle. Well, it's very easy. Take either side. If you're on the left side, we're going to subtract. If you're on the right side, we're going to add. But take either side and just add the period or subtract the period to get the next vertical asymptote. So this is going to be easy since it's 0. So I'm going to add pi over 4, and I know that pi over 4 is where our next asymptote is. So I can very easily draw our asymptote now. Alright, so at this point, now is where we get to the fun part. where we have to start doing our t-chart. Okay, so we have our t-chart, and we know that it goes from negative pi over 4 to 0. But we're adding pi over 16 as our increment. So negative pi over 4 plus pi over 16 is going to give me a negative 3 pi over 16. Now just keep in mind that I'm getting common denominators and adding. Okay, negative 3 pi over 16 plus pi over 16 is going to be a negative 2 pi over 16, which is the same thing as negative pi over 8. And negative pi over 8 plus pi over 16 gives me a negative pi over 16. And that is getting common denominators to get those x values. Now, we do know for a fact that these two are undefined because they're vertical asymptotes. So we just need to find these other three. So take your negative 3 pi over 16, and we're going to substitute it in our original problem. So 4 times negative 3 pi over 16 plus pi. So 4 times negative 3 pi over 16 is negative 12 pi over 16 plus pi. And if you knock all that out, you're going to get, with common denominators and things, you should end up with pi over 4. Now keep in mind your unit circle. Pi over 4 is the point 1 over the square root of 2 and 1 over the square root of 2. And cotangent is the x coordinate over the y coordinate. So that's going to be 1 over the square root of 2 divided by 1 over the square root of 2. So the cotangent of pi over 4, which is what this would be the cotangent of pi over 4, would be 1. 1 over the square root of 2 divided by 1 over the square root of 2. So that's 1. So the cotangent of pi over 4 is 1. But don't forget this little negative sign out in front. So that's going to actually make it a negative 1. Okay? Now do the same thing for negative pi over 8. Plug it in, get the common denominator, get your answer, find out where it is on the unit circle. When you plug negative pi over 8 in, after you get your common denominator, you're going to have this. After you plug negative pi over 8 in, you're going to be finding the negative cotangent of pi over 2. So if you notice, that's after we've gotten our common denominators and everything, after plugging negative pi over 8 back in the function. So pi over 2 is here. That's the point 0, 1. So remember, it's x over y. So 0 over 1 is 0. So the cotangent of pi over 2 is 0. And it doesn't matter about the negative out in front for it, of course. Then take negative pi over 16, plug it in. So we get y, after you get your common denominator, you get y equals the cotangent of 3 pi over 4. So remember, 3 pi over 4 is right here. And the only difference in it and pi over 4 is we have a negative 1 over the square root of 2. So actually, this cotangent, and this should be a positive actually. So actually, negative 1 over the square root of 2 divided by 1 over the square root of 2 is negative 1. So the cotangent of 3 pi over 4 is negative 1. But remember, we have this negative in front. So the negative of a negative 1 actually makes it a positive 1. So we have 1 negative 1. All right, so we have negative 3 pi over 16, and we have negative 1. We have negative pi over 8, 0, and we have negative pi over 16, 1. So after you graph it, it's going to look something like this. After you graph it, it's going to look something like this. And there's a good picture of it at the bottom of page 203. It has a better graph than I have. But, well, how are we going to do these next points? Well, you can either keep on extending your t-chart, and you'll get keep on adding your increment. Pi over 16, 2 pi over 16 is pi over 8, 3 pi over 16, and pi over 4. And we know that pi over 4 is undefined because it's a vertical asymptote. So you're going to have to take those three, plug them in the same way we did the other ones. And if you do that, you're going to get negative 1, 0, 1. Again, you'll get that same thing because it's repeating, remember. So pi over 16, negative 1. Pi over 8, 0. 3 pi over 16, 1. And it looks something like this. Okay? And so you have your 2 cycles of cotangent that we've graphed. Okay? So hopefully that helps you understand cotangent. Next is cosecant and secant. Have a good day.